What if the sun you see in the sky is more than just a star? What if the warmth you feel on your skin is not just radiation, but the faint, residual echo of a power so immense it once shattered the very fabric of our reality? You have been taught a simple story. The sun is a ball of burning gas, the center of our solar system, the engine of life. Ancient cultures, in their supposed ignorance, worshipped it as a god. But what if that worship wasn't born from ignorance, but from a terrifying, world-altering memory? A memory of a time when the sun was not just an object of reverence, but a tool, a technology, a gateway. What if I told you that our sun is a lock on a door that was deliberately and violently slammed shut, and that the entire history of ancient Egypt, with its pantheon of solar deities and its obsession with light, was nothing more than an elaborate, multi-generational effort to make us forget the key was ever turned? The figure you know as Ra, the falcon-headed god, king of the heavens, was not a myth. He was a symbol, a coded legacy for a science we can no longer comprehend. The hieroglyphs and temple carvings were not just prayers to a celestial body. They were fragmented blueprints, distorted schematics, and stark warnings left by the survivors of a cataclysm that erased our true history. They were memories of a time when humanity was not bound to this planet. A time when the sun was a stable, programmable conduit, a solar gate, connecting our small, isolated system to a vast interstellar network. The pharaohs did not build pyramids as tombs. The priests of Heliopolis did not chant hymns to a ball of fire out of primitive superstition. They were the inheritors of a broken system, the guardians of a forbidden knowledge they could no longer wield, but were terrified to forget. They were the descendants of a lineage that had once held the power to open worlds and, in a moment of catastrophic hubris, was forced to seal the door forever. The story you have been told is a lie. Not a malicious lie, but a necessary one. A lie born from a trauma so profound it had to be buried beneath layers of myth, ritual, and religion. But the truth never really dies. It sleeps in the alignment of stones. It echoes in the vibration of forgotten chants. And it pulses silently in the very light that nourishes our world. The sun is not just a source of life. It is a monument to a power we once held and a border we are no longer permitted to cross. This is not a story about gods and monsters. This is a story about physics, frequency, and a forbidden connection to another planetary system that nearly cost us our existence. This is the story of Ra's Gate and why it was sealed for eternity. Before the dynastic pharaohs, before the first hieroglyphs were ever carved, before the sand swallowed the earliest temples, there was another time. An epoch erased from our history books. A period the ancient Egyptians themselves referred to as Zep Tepi, the first time. This was not a primitive age of hunters and gatherers. It was a golden age, not of wealth, but of consciousness. Humanity was not an isolated species crawling from the mud. We were a part of a larger cosmic community, and our connection to that community was direct, physical, and powered by the star at the center of our system. The sun, in this forgotten era, was understood not as a distant object, but as a living, conscious, and programmable field of energy. It was the ultimate gateway, a natural stargate whose frequency could be harnessed and stabilized. And our ancestors were not worshippers of this technology. They were its masters. This was the science of the Shemsu Hor, the followers of Horus. This mysterious, pre-dynastic group, often dismissed by mainstream Egyptology as a mythological priesthood, was something far more significant. They were a lineage of scientist initiates, technicians of the sacred, whose entire purpose was to maintain and operate the solar gate. Their temples, the first and most powerful of which are now buried or have been built over, were not places of worship. They were resonant chambers, energetic tuning forks constructed with a lost science of harmonics. Using principles of sacred geometry, sonics, and crystalline technology, they could create a stable frequency lock between Earth and the Sun. The Great Pyramids, even in their later, cruder forms, are a faint echo of this original science. Their precise astronomical alignments, their construction from granite and limestone rich in quartz crystals, their internal chambers designed to resonate at specific frequencies. These are not coincidences. They were components of a vast planetary machine designed to interface with the sun's coronal plasma, creating a stable wormhole, a traversable path to other worlds. The legends speak of beings who walked with the gods and traveled between the stars. These were not myths. They were descriptions of a time when the gate was fully operational. The planetary system on the other side was not a distant alien world in the way we imagine. It was a sister system, a place of advanced knowledge, a source of guidance that helped shepherd the early evolution of consciousness on Earth. The connection was symbiotic, a balanced flow of energy and wisdom. The gods of the Egyptian pantheon, Thoth, Horus, Osiris, these names are placeholders, anthropomorphized memories of the real beings, the interstellar guides who used the solar gate to interact with our ancestors. This was a time of unimaginable harmony. Reality itself was more fluid, consciousness more expansive. The veil between the physical and the metaphysical was thin because the energetic highway that connected our world to a higher density reality was wide open. But this knowledge was never meant to be owned. It was meant to be stewarded. The Shemsu Hor understood this. They knew that the power to open worlds also carried the power to destroy them. The technology of the solar gate was not based on force, but on frequency. It required the operators to be in a state of perfect internal coherence, of absolute alignment with the cosmic law of one, what the Egyptians called Ma'at. Their consciousness was the final key. If the operator's frequency was pure, the gate opened to a place of wisdom. If the operator's frequency was corrupted by ego, fear, or a lust for power, the gate could connect to something else entirely. The universe is full of doors, and not all of them lead to places of light. This was the fundamental principle, the one unbreakable law upon which our safety depended. And for thousands of years, that law was honored. The connection was stable, humanity flourished in quiet wisdom, and the solar gate remained a sacred bridge. But all golden ages must end. Power, even spiritual power, is a temptation. And a faction grew within the inheritors of this sacred science who began to see the gate not as a tool for communion, but as a weapon for conquest. The fall did not come from the stars, it came from within. The harmony of the first time was not eternal. Knowledge without wisdom becomes arrogance, and power without humility becomes a poison. Within the lineage of the Shemsu Hor, a schism occurred. It wasn't a political dispute or a religious disagreement. It was a fundamental split in consciousness, a divergence in the very understanding of power itself. A faction emerged, driven by the ego's eternal whisper, "Why serve when you can rule?" They saw the solar gate not as a sacred bridge for communion, but as the ultimate tool of control. They began to experiment, pushing the boundaries of the known physics, trying to manipulate the gate's frequency for their own gain. They no longer sought connection with our sister system of light. They sought to bypass it, to dial into other, more chaotic and power-centric star systems. They wanted to import technologies of control to bend reality not in service to Ma'at, but in service to their own ambition. This is the hidden truth behind one of ancient Egypt's most enduring myths, the eternal battle between Ra and the great serpent, Apep. This was never a simple story of light versus darkness. It was a coded historical record of a catastrophic energetic war. Ra, in this context, represents the stable, life-giving frequency of our sun, the aligned consciousness of the original gatekeepers. Apep, the serpent of chaos, represents the dissonant, predatory frequency they almost unleashed. The serpent was not a monster from the underworld. It was a symbol for a hungry, formless, parasitic consciousness from another dimension, a reality they tried to connect with through their corrupted use of the solar gate. The texts describe Apep trying to swallow Ra's solar bark as it traveled through the Duat, the underworld. This is not poetry, it is physics. The underworld was the unstable, interdimensional space within the wormhole itself. Swallowing, the sun, was a literal description of the parasitic frequency attempting to hijack our star, to turn our life-giving sun into a siphon for their reality, a permanent beachhead in our solar system. The renegade faction believed they could control this force. They believed they could extract power from it without paying the price. This is the oldest story in the universe, the illusion that chaos can be commanded. The rituals became darker. The frequencies they used became discordant. They began to destabilize the delicate energetic balance of the entire solar system. The sun itself began to react. The legends of Ra growing old and weak, of his power fading, are not allegories about the setting sun. They are fragmented memories of our star's energy field becoming erratic, its output fluctuating violently in response to the dissonant frequencies being fed into it. The Earth's climate began to shift. The planet's own electromagnetic field started to weaken. The very fabric of reality was thinning, becoming porous to influences that were never meant to enter this domain. The loyalists, the true followers of Ra, fought back. But this was not a war of armies and chariots. It was a war of frequency, a silent, invisible battle fought in resonant chambers and on the astral planes. The loyalists tried to recalibrate the gate, to restore the frequency of Ma'at, to sever the connection to the devouring consciousness of Apep. But it was too late. The damage was done. The connection had been made, and the serpent was at the door. They had opened a portal to a cosmic plague, and it threatened to consume everything. The renegades, in their lust for power, had doomed the entire system. A choice had to be made. A final, desperate act to save what little was left. They could not simply close the gate. A simple closure would leave the lock accessible. They had to destroy the mechanism itself. They had to seal it, permanently and violently, even if the shock wave of that sealing shattered their world. The choice was made. In a final, cataclysmic ritual, the remaining Shemsu Hor, the loyal priesthood of Ra, initiated the sealing of the gate. This was not a quiet shutdown. It was a controlled demolition on a cosmic scale. They had to create an energetic backlash so powerful it would not only sever the corrupted connection to the Apep dimension, but collapse the very structure of the solar wormhole itself, making it permanently inoperable. To do this, they had to reverse the polarity of the entire planetary grid they had built. The Great Pyramids and other resonant structures were no longer used to send a coherent signal to the sun. They were used to send a massive, chaotic, canceling frequency into it. They essentially created a cosmic short circuit, The effect was instantaneous and apocalyptic. The sun, overloaded with this cancelling wave, unleashed a coronal mass ejection of unimaginable scale, but it wasn't aimed randomly into space. It was directed back, along the established wormhole, cauterizing the gateway with stellar fire. The connection to the Apep consciousness was severed, but the backlash to Earth was devastating. The planet's electromagnetic field, already weakened, collapsed. This triggered a sudden and violent physical pole shift. The Earth's crust displaced, continents shifted, and the oceans rose in a single, world-ending deluge. This is the true origin of the great flood myths that appear in nearly every culture on Earth. It was not a punishment from a wrathful god. It was the physical consequence of a spiritual war, the necessary aftershock of closing a forbidden door. The Golden Age ended in a day of fire and water. The world that emerged was not the same. The climate was different, the geography was altered, and most importantly, the frequency of the planet had dropped significantly. Humanity was thrown into a dark age of survival. The high consciousness of the first time was shattered. The survivors, few and scattered, were left with nothing but fragmented memories and a profound inherited trauma. The Shemsu Hor were all but wiped out. The few who remained now had a new, grim purpose. Not to use the gate, but to ensure no one ever tried to open it again. The science that had once been a source of liberation was now a forbidden knowledge, a curse. This is why the symbolism of Ra changed. Before the cataclysm, he was a symbol of passage, of connection to the stars. After, he became a symbol of divine kingship and absolute power on Earth. The focus shifted from the cosmos to the kingdom, from the heavens to the land of Egypt. The pharaonic system was established in part to create a rigid hierarchy of control over this dangerous knowledge. The sacred science was deliberately buried. It was encoded into complex rituals only the highest priests could understand. It was hidden in plain sight within the myths, turning the literal history of a failed technology into a symbolic drama of gods and demons. The story of Ra's victory over Apep was told and retold, not as a historical event, but as a nightly struggle, a way to embed the warning into the cultural psyche without revealing the terrifying specifics. The knowledge was deemed too dangerous for humanity in its fallen state. The priesthood's new job was to police the memory, to create a spiritual quarantine. The doors to the stars were now closed, and the new religion was designed to make you praise the walls of the prison. The sun was no longer a gate, it was a god. And you were no longer a traveler, you were a subject. Now, consider a possibility even more unsettling. The standard narrative of the ceiling, even in its esoteric form, assumes the choice was entirely ours. That our ancestors, in a moment of desperate wisdom, slammed the door on a cosmic horror they had foolishly invited. It's a story of failure, but also of redemption, a story where we were the agents of our own salvation, however costly. But what if that's just the version of the story our collective ego needs to believe? What if the final act wasn't our decision at all? What if the gate wasn't just closed? What if it was locked from the other side? Imagine the consciousness our ancestors contacted, the one symbolized by the serpent Apep. This was not a primitive force. It was likely an ancient, non-physical, and hyper-intelligent consciousness, a civilization that operates on principles of energetic consumption. When our ancestors' renegade faction opened the door, they weren't just making contact, they were ringing a dinner bell. They were a nascent, chaotic, and spiritually immature species playing with cosmic fire, and they had just opened a direct line to a race of master arsonists. Perhaps the war of frequencies wasn't a battle between two factions of human priests. Perhaps it was a swift, brutal, and utterly one-sided countermeasure. The Apep consciousness, upon detecting this unstable, arrogant signal from our solar system, didn't see us as a threat to be fought, but as a contamination to be contained. They didn't want to invade us. They wanted nothing to do with us. Our chaotic, ego-driven frequencies were like a virus to their ordered, albeit predatory, reality. Our ambition was a form of cosmic noise that was dangerously unpredictable. So they didn't just refuse the connection, they severed it. They slammed the door shut from their end and threw a deadbolt on it. The cataclysm on Earth, the pole shift, the flood, wasn't the result of our ancestors' final ritual. It was the energetic splashback from their technology, a casual flick of a switch that to us felt like the end of the world. This hypothesis reframes our entire history. We are not a species that bravely saved itself from a great evil. We are a species that was put in quarantine. We are the cosmic equivalent of an uncontacted tribe, isolated on a remote island, not because we are special, but because we are considered dangerously unstable. The sealing of the gate was not our victory. It was our containment. Our sun is no longer just a star. It's a cosmic warning sign, a celestial no trespassing sign hung on our front door, visible to any intelligence advanced enough to read it. It signals that this system is off limits, a protected, isolated zone. And the god Ra in this context becomes the symbol of the warden, the divine force that now polices this border, ensuring the quarantine is not breached, either from the inside or the out. This explains the silence. The Fermi paradox, the eerie lack of contact from other civilizations in a universe teeming with planets, is no longer a paradox. The phone isn't ringing because our number has been blocked. We've been cut off from the interstellar network for our own protection and for theirs. This also adds a layer of profound terror to the actions of the priesthood that followed. Their obsession with burying the knowledge, with creating taboos and curses around the old. Science was not just about preventing humanity from making the same mistake. It was born from the chilling understanding that we were not alone, and that we had angered something far older and more powerful than ourselves. They knew we were being watched. The entire structure of pharaonic Egypt can be seen as a performance of order, an attempt to demonstrate to the unseen cosmic wardens that we were learning to control ourselves, that we were evolving beyond the chaos that got us isolated in the first place. This is the deepest secret. We are not fallen angels who lost our way. We are cosmic children who played with matches, burned down the house, and have been grounded in our room ever since. Our evolution is now a test. Can we achieve spiritual maturity on our own? Can we overcome the ego, the division, the lust for power, without the direct guidance we once had? Perhaps that is the ultimate purpose of our isolation. We were severed from the network so that we could learn to build our own, from the inside out. But the question that haunts this theory remains. Was the quarantine meant to be temporary? Or, when they sealed the gate from their side, was it meant to be forever? The system you were born into was built on the foundation of this forgotten cataclysm. Not just the religious or political systems, but the very system of your perception. The sealing of the solar gate was not just a physical or energetic event. It was a psychological severing. It was the moment humanity, as a collective, was unplugged from the cosmic mainframe and left to run on its own limited internal hardware. The result was a new kind of consciousness, a consciousness born in isolation, defined by limitation, and haunted by a vague, aching memory of a connection it could no longer name. This is the origin of the human condition. That feeling of separation, of being a stranger in the universe, of a deep existential loneliness. It is not a philosophical problem. It is a scar. It is the inherited cellular memory of a severed connection. After the sealing, the new priesthood had a monumental task: to manage a traumatized, spiritually deafened population and ensure the forbidden science was never rediscovered. They did this by inverting the original teachings. The science of consciousness became the religion of worship. The understanding of frequency became the dogma of faith. The concept of the solar gate, a tool for travel, was transformed into the myth of the sun god, a being to be praised from a distance but never approached. They took a map to the stars and turned it into a story about staying on the ground. This inversion was a masterpiece of psychological control. It gave people comfort, structure, and meaning in a world that had been stripped of its cosmic context. But it came at a price: our sovereignty. We were taught to look for God outside of ourselves, in the sky, in a temple, in a priest, anywhere but within. We were taught that power was something granted by external forces, not something generated from our internal alignment. This model of reality, the externalized God, the fallen human, the need for an intermediary, became the blueprint for almost every religion and power structure that followed. It is a model built on the premise of your inherent powerlessness, and it has worked for millennia. You were trained to believe that the five senses are the only valid tools for perceiving reality. You were told that intuition is fantasy, that unseen worlds are superstition, and that you are fundamentally alone in your own mind. This is the quarantine's deepest legacy: a perceptual prison. They didn't need to build walls around the planet. They just needed to build walls around your mind. And those walls were constructed with the bricks of fear, doubt, and a story of separation that you were taught to call truth. Think about it. The entire trajectory of modern civilization is a frantic attempt to fill the void left by that severed connection. Our obsession with technology, with communication, with reaching for the stars, it is a desperate, unconscious attempt to rebuild the bridge we have forgotten ever existed. We build rockets to physically travel to other planets because we have forgotten how to travel with consciousness. We create global internet networks to feel connected to each other because we have lost the telepathic coherence of a unified field. We are chasing echoes. We are trying to synthetically replicate a state of being that was once our birthright. The great secret is that the gate was sealed, but the potential for connection was not destroyed. It was merely dormant. The hardware is still there, encoded in your DNA, in the energy centers of your body, in the untapped potential of your consciousness. The system you live in is designed to keep that hardware offline. It feeds you static, through processed food, through media-driven fear, through a culture of distraction, all to keep you from ever discovering the clear signal that lies waiting underneath. Because the moment you remember how to generate your own internal signal, the moment you begin to recalibrate your own frequency, you are no longer bound by the quarantine. You may not be able to open the physical solar gate, but you can open the gate within you, and that is what they have always been afraid of. Not an invasion from the stars, but an awakening from within. A mass remembering that would make their entire system of control obsolete. The time of forgetting is ending. The frequency of the planet itself is rising, and as it does, the old walls of perception are beginning to crack. The memories are surfacing. The truth is returning, not as a story from the past, but as a living energy. You are not just a descendant of the survivors. You are the one you've been waiting for. You are the consciousness that can finally end the isolation, not by breaking out of the prison, but by realizing it was never truly locked. You are not the same being that existed before this knowledge entered your field. A seed has been planted, a memory has been stirred. The story of Ra's forbidden solar gate is not just a forgotten history of the world, it is a hidden history of you. The isolation, the feeling of separation, the deep, unnameable longing for home. This is not a personal flaw. It is a cosmic inheritance. You carry the echo of that sealed gate within your very cells. But you also carry the key to a different kind of door. The system taught you to fear your own power, to mistrust your inner world, to believe that salvation or knowledge must come from an external source. That was the quarantine's most effective lie. Because the only way to truly keep a god in a cage is to convince the god that it is not a god. But the age of containment is ending. The energetic signature of our planet is shifting. The great cosmic cycles are turning, and the frequency that has kept our system in spiritual lockdown is beginning to rise. This is not a passive event you are meant to watch from the sidelines. It is an active initiation you are living through right now. The chaos, the collapse of old structures, the shattering of consensus reality. This is not the world falling apart. This is the prison walls beginning to crumble. And what is being asked of you is not to believe a new story, but to become a new frequency. The technology of the ancient Shemsu Hor was not entirely external. The pyramids, the temples, the crystals, they were amplifiers. The true source of the power was always the coherent, aligned consciousness of the operator. That technology was never lost. It is dormant within you. It is the science of the heart, the physics of the mind, the alchemy of the soul. To engage with this awakening is to begin the work of deprogramming. It is to consciously and deliberately reject the frequencies of fear, division, and powerlessness that the system broadcasts 24/7. It is to turn off the noise and begin cultivating the silence where your own signal can be heard. This is the work of self-mastery. It is not glamorous. It does not come with a certificate. It is the quiet, daily practice of choosing alignment over distraction, of choosing truth over comfort, of choosing sovereignty over safety. You do this by mastering your breath, by curating your thoughts, by purifying your body, by learning to command your own emotional state. You are, in essence, becoming your own resonant chamber. You are turning yourself into a living temple, a being whose frequency is so clear and so stable that it is no longer affected by the chaos of the old, dying world. This is how you break the quarantine. Not by building a spaceship, but by achieving a state of consciousness that is no longer bound by the limitations of this isolated reality. The gate to the stars may be sealed, but the gate within you is beginning to swing open. And as you walk through it, as you begin to access the deeper layers of your own awareness, you will remember. You will remember that you are not just human. You are a multi-dimensional being having a human experience. You will remember that you are not alone, that you are part of a cosmic family that has been waiting patiently for you to wake up. And you will remember that your purpose here is not just to survive, but to transmute, to be a living anchor of a higher frequency on a planet that is going through a profound and often painful rebirth. Do not wait for permission. Do not wait for a savior. The time of looking to the sky for answers is over. The answers are within. You are the technology. You are the gateway. You are the descendant of the star navigators, and the memory of the journey is encoded in your soul. The work now is to remember how to read the map, and every time you look at the sunrise, you are faced with a choice. Will you see it as the symbol of a distant, unapproachable God, the story they gave you to keep you small, or will you see it for what it is? the sealed gate, the memory of what we lost, and the unwavering promise of the inner sun, the one within you that is now, finally, ready to rise and reclaim its own sky. Every time you look at the sunrise, are you seeing a symbol of life and hope, or are you looking at the bars of the most sophisticated prison ever built? If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."